we take you to Germany. Well, as we here record exceptionally low infections, Germany has now seen record numbers of coronavirus cases. Chancellor Angela Merkel and regional leaders will be meeting today to decide on new measures amidst talks of new lockdowns. Thomas Sparrow is political correspondent with our partners DW, has been explaining this to my colleague Benis Abubedu-Lanza.
Germany has registered various records in the last few days, so numbers are increasing actually dramatically. And according to the figures that were published by Germany's Public Health Institute, in the last 24 hours, there were nearly 15,000 new coronavirus cases. Now, obviously, if you look at Germany as a whole, you can say that Germany has fared comparatively well. For example, if you look at other countries like the US or even here in Europe, countries that have been much more affected. But for Germany, having 15,000 coronavirus cases in one day is a lot. Just to put that into context, exactly a month ago, so on the 28th of September, Germany had just over 1,000 coronavirus cases that were registered. So this just gives you an indication as to why Germany and German authorities in particular are so particularly worried about this trend and about what exactly needs to be done to deal with the coronavirus. An additional very grim statistic is that Germany also in the last few days exceeded the number of 10,000 coronavirus deaths. It is not the first country to reach that grim milestone, but it is just a further indication of how serious the problem is here in Europe, and how serious the problem is also in other parts of the continent as well.
Thomas, events are being cancelled because of the virus, including the upcoming party conference of Chancellor Merkel's party. Tell us about new restrictions being considered.
This is very important. This party conference, they happen on a regular basis, but obviously in coronavirus times, it has been very difficult to hold these party conference, and they have a very significant element this year, because next year in 2021, Germany will have federal elections. And as we have discussed on this program on many occasions, Chancellor Angela Merkel has actually said that she will not stand for re-election. In other words, next year there will be a new German Chancellor. And this particular party conference that was supposed to be happening at the beginning of December was to elect a new party leader in the CDU, in the Conservative Party. That's Angela Merkel's party, and that leader that would have been chosen would then be in the running to become Chancellor candidate in next year's elections. It is not the only party conference that was cancelled. The left party in the opposition also had to postpone its own party conference, but this just gives you an idea of how difficult it is to plan politically what's going to happen in the next few months when you have such high numbers of coronavirus cases. If we look at this from a social perspective, in other words, events that are not necessarily political, then you also have big events that have been cancelled. Let's not forget that in the next few months you'll have Christmas, and Christmas here in Germany is particularly important. You may know those world famous Christmas markets that you see every year here in Germany. Well, because of the coronavirus, some of those very famous Christmas markets, like in Nuremberg in the southern part of the country, or some here in Berlin as well, have had to cancel. This is certainly a big development here in this country, and it again gives you an idea of how difficult it is to plan the next coming months, especially as Christmas approaches, where people obviously tend to meet in larger groups.
So you've been speaking to people. How are they reacting to the possibility of new restrictions?
I went to some of Berlin's busiest streets. You may want to know that in those busiest streets here in Berlin, now there's also a compulsory face mask wearing requirement. In other words, when people go to these streets, they have to wear a face mask, not only indoors if they go to a shop, but also when they're walking actually on the streets. And although many people did say that they favor new restrictions because they have to get the infection under control, because numbers have to be reduced, and then everyone has to sort of play their part and make sure that the effort is a joint effort, I also sensed some skepticism from many as to whether the direction that Germany is going towards now is the right direction. In other words, whether these kinds of restrictions that are being discussed will actually help to reduce the numbers. It's important also to mention this meeting that is happening here in Berlin will probably decide on some of those measures as well that have been discussed also on the streets, whether there's a need to close further bars or restaurants and things like that. So this is also important from a perspective of what I was talking to people on the streets in Berlin. Again, many view this favorably. Many understand that restrictions have to be put in place. But for others, it is also something very difficult, especially if they have big families and they have to take care of them as well. Some people even told me that they were actually very afraid.
Thank you very much. Thomas Sparrow is political correspondent with our partners, the DW, and he's just been sharing with us the record cases Germany is seeing with regards to the coronavirus pandemic and how authorities there are planning to deal with it.